There we are. Hello, everyone. I'm Jen, and I am here with Emily and Allie, and we're going to talk about Pilates with a spinal fusion today. So all three of us have spinal fusions, and I'm just excited for us to share stories and experiences and insights and have a conversation. So let's start by let's all talk for just a moment about where we're coming in from. So I also want to know where the audience is coming in from. Right now, I'm in Boise, Idaho. Prior to the pandemic, I was in Chicago, and I was also in New York prior to Chicago. So I've been a little bit all over the place. And Emily, how about you?
I'm in England, so I'm about an hour up from London, so quite central. But yeah, across the pond from you guys, which is exciting.
Awesome.
And I'm in Franklin, Tennessee, which is just outside Nashville in the States. I think Jen and I are in the same time zone, and Emily, it's like completely different.
Yeah, it's 6 p.m. here.
Yep.
Yeah, and here I'm actually an hour earlier, so I'm at 11, and Allie, you're at noon, is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah. So if you're watching, go ahead and type into the chat and let us know where you are, and then we'll kind of just see where people are coming in from. But the first question that I wanted us all to talk about is just kind of our journey with scoliosis and our journey with having spinal fusion surgery, which I feel like it's an ongoing journey. So I'm excited to hear both of your perspectives. So, Allie, why don't you kick us off?
Okay, I'd be happy to. So I'm Allie. I said that. When I was 13, I went through a school screening. Public schools where I grew up did scoliosis screenings for everyone in 8th grade. So I did a screening. That's where they found my scoliosis. And then I ended up going to a specialist, an orthopedist, and was kind of passed around to different people. Ended up wearing a brace for about 6 months. And they pretty much, watched me closely, obviously, and determined that the brace was not doing a whole lot. It was really kind of causing more harm than good because I wasn't sleeping and that kind of thing. So after about 6 months, I had spinal fusion surgery when I was 14. And honestly, I was fine for probably 6 or 7 years. I really didn't have that much pain. I felt great. And it wasn't until I got to college and started working out and moving. And I think I kind of shifted stuff in my body, and I started having hip pain and low back pain. And I think I learned that I wasn't invincible. So that kind of led me to explore movement more and to figure out what movement was good for my body, which is ultimately what led me here. So, and you're right, it is an ongoing journey because I'm still learning to deal with it. What about you, Emily?
Yeah, really interestingly similar, but also opposite. So mine was discovered, I think, by my mum when I was about 14, my scoliosis. And I always say it's one of those times where you're growing up and you start to hide your body a bit more. I think us girls tend to do that as we start to go through puberty. So quite lucky it was picked up. Mine was bad enough that I didn't have the brace. They just said straight away in for surgery. And a year later, I was fused. But this is where I say similar to you. I think for about 6 or 7 years, I was fine. But it was because I was doing lots. I was dancing. I was trying to get back to lots of activity. And it was only when I stopped and I was doing a desk job, and that's when my back really, really suffered. And that's when I trained in Pilates, because I thought I have to do something about this. It's too much. I don't know how my body's reacting. I don't understand the fusion because I never met anybody else with a fusion. And so it is an ongoing thing. I'm still learning what makes my body react worse. And I'm learning that balance between sitting down and working and actually doing too much activity. I think there's a very fine balance. So yeah, that's kind of where I am with mine.
Excellent.
I had a similar experience where a desk job is what tipped it off because, you move and then all of a sudden you sit, and that's still so true. I have to be careful of how much I sit versus move. So I'm with you there.
And I'll echo that. I mean, in my own personal experience, but then also like there is research that shows sitting is the most compressive thing that you can do for your spine. And there are lots of us that sit for extended periods of time, and it's hard to balance that and how to decompress the spine. So my scoliosis was discovered when I was 11 in ballet class. My dance teacher found it. And we went to a chiropractor first who took x-rays, measured the Cobb angle, and then gave me some exercises to try for 6 months to see how I did with them. And in that 6 months, it progressed greatly. It's a little unclear because when we did go to the orthopedic let us know that the chiropractor had incorrectly measured the Cobb angle. So it was a much larger Cobb angle than we initially thought. And, this was in Idaho, which was a very rural state at that time in the late 80s. So I really appreciate that chiropractor believed there was like a physical therapy approach to working with scoliosis. I don't think he had the skill set. And quite honestly, like in America, no one had the skill set yet. As far as physical therapy goes. So we had some second opinions. I went down to California and got a second opinion. And I had a orthopedic here in Idaho. And this was around the time where they were debating between Harrington fusions and the CD method, which is the Cottrell-Duboset. I always have to look that up, the CD method. But the CD method was coming from France and it was pretty new. So we decided to have the surgery in Idaho. The options were really wait and see, or you can have surgery now. And I was young, so I was 12. And this was just a thoracic fusion. So T3 to T10 is what they fused. My lumbar is I still have a lumbar curve. And this surgeon thought, if we kind of adjust the thoracic, hopefully the lumbar will come into line. And so that's what we did. I wore a brace for 6 months after. I started a new junior high in a very thick brace. And I did pretty well. I mean, I couldn't do anything for 6 months. I started dancing again. I was a very serious dancer. The only limitation was that I wasn't supposed to do gymnastics. I went to college. I studied accounting. I tried to do some accounting and did do some consulting on and off. Again, like sitting all day was really hard for me, and also dancing all day was hard for me. And I managed to balance those until I would say maybe 10 years ago when I was doing Showboat at the Kennedy Center, and it was a big show and there were a lot of performances, like 15 shows in 3 weeks. And I started to have some weird rib things that I now really understand, like my concavities and my convexities. I was also getting, I was being partnered by someone who was a little bit smaller than me. So he was partnering me with the rib cage instead of down at the pelvis. So I had fingers going into my convexities and concavities. But, that's what started my journey with learning about not only the spinal fusion, but the scoliosis. Because again, I had never met anyone either. And so it's been a really exciting journey. And I love it because, since scoliosis is idiopathic, it feels like there's just so much to learn and so much that the community has to learn from each other.
Yeah.
And idiopathic meaning most scoliosis is idiopathic, meaning we don't know what causes it. So I should define that. So that's my experience.
That's amazing. So were you professionally dancing? Was that your full-time career?
Wow. So in the States, I would say many dancers and many artists, they have amazing careers, but it might not be full-time. because it's a little bit of difference between Europe and the States, how we fund the arts. So I danced a lot. I had a career as both like a concert dancer in a dance company, and then also I danced in, close to 15 operas or so.
Wow.
So I did do a lot of dancing, and I knew nothing about my scoliosis or my spinal fusion.
Until you had to, and it was like,
until I had to.
Yeah.
And even now, I've had conversations with other people that have kind of been like, how did you do that? And even now I'm not quite sure how I did that, but I think that in many ways, like having a spinal fusion is learning to live with paradox. Like we can do anything and we're also limited.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a hard one to balance confidence-wise as well, isn't it? Because you want to be built up and feel like you can conquer the world, but like Allie said earlier, you're not invincible, and it's finding that balance is tough. It's hard.
Yeah, it's very hard. And it changes too as we age. So, that's the other piece, is that if I tried to do what I did when I was 20, there's no way. My body would not do it. So it's also like learning that the natural aging process kind of affects us with our scoliosis and our spinal fusion too, I think.
Yeah,
for sure.
So let's now, this question came from you, Emily, and I think I'm really grateful that you asked it, because I don't think I would have asked it myself. So thank you. But let's talk about how scoliosis has affected our emotional well-being and what we do to take good care of ourselves. And if you want to kick us off, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, let me tell you, like, I thought having a fusion was the end of the world. I thought that was me done. As I said earlier, I was a dancer too. I was also a figure skater. And I think the fusion affected me emotionally in ways I didn't really realize. And a big moment for me was when I first tried to get back to figure skating. And I remember I went back on the ice, and a big part of figure skating is lumbar extension, which I've got a fusion down to L5. So I ain't got nothing. And I tried to go skating, and it was heartbreaking. I couldn't do it. And my confidence just hit rock bottom there, and I had this real realization that I wouldn't be able to do my favorite thing anymore. And I think I kind of suppressed it after that. I just thought, right, can't do it, end of the world, done, that's it, push it to the back of my mind. And it wasn't until I was in counselling for something else years later that we drew this timeline out, and she said, well, can we put big impactful things that have happened to you in your life on this timeline? And I was like, oh yeah, had this major spinal surgery, never did my favorite hobby ever again. And she goes, let's just talk about that a little bit more. And I thought, oh yeah, okay, that was quite big. And I think where we had surgery so young, you don't realize how much of that you continue to hold. And so I think emotionally, personally, it's been suppressed, but it's been in there. And I think that makes you hold yourself differently. If your underlying stress is high, you hold yourself differently, and that can contribute to the physical impact and the physical stress that scoliosis has long term. So I think in terms of managing that, talking to people has been the best thing. Like speaking to you guys today is monumental. It's amazing. And building connections with people who are in the same boat has such a huge impact. Like this community is insane, and I don't think I can ever put in words the impact that this community has on my life, and kind of seeing people show their scars when they haven't done for 10 years, or people who are seeing improvements in their pain, that boosts me and that keeps me going. And it shows that, yes, I've had this huge operation, but it's not a negative. It doesn't have to be this horrible moment in my life where everything crashed and burned. It was the start of this incredible journey. And so reframing that has been so powerful. I don't know if that's something that you guys have been able to find too.
Yeah, I love the reframing. because you can look at things as you can look at what you can't do, or you can look at what you can do. And when you look at what you can do, the creativity starts to get stimulated, and it's just so interesting. So I love that. It's great.
Yeah, I echo that too. In a way, I feel like my fusion has kind of forced me to be a little more creative, because no, my body doesn't move like someone who doesn't have a fusion. And it's like, okay, but can I still find the same benefit from this motion or this exercise or whatever it is? And I love that idea of like, there are things that you can't do, but what about everything that you can, and the doors that a fusion has opened, even in your mind, I love that.
Yeah. And one thing I remember thinking was that this pain was going to last forever. And I had this real click in my head. I thought, if I'm going to be in pain forever, I'm going to be in pain in a boardroom. I'm not going to be in pain sat in bed on my own, like we can go for it. There's nothing stopping that. So yeah. Absolutely. I mean, have you guys felt that you were emotionally prepared for your surgery at such a young age?
No. And that's no one's fault. Like, I think as Jen was mentioning earlier, we're not that advanced about what to expect with a spinal fusion surgery. And no, the emotional was not even really a discussion with the team of surgeons or the nurses or whatever. It was just like, all right, let's get you through this thing. And what I've realized is, like you were mentioning, I stuffed things down, whatever. I mean, I consider that kind of a trauma in a way. And you were mentioning counseling, and that has been a huge help for me too. And that's what I was going to say about, how are you taking care? A big one is counseling, and is digging through some of those emotions, because I mean, the truth is, you have a completely different body pre-surgery and post-surgery. It moves differently. It feels different. And sometimes you lose touch with it, because it's like, I don't know my body anymore. And counseling has been a huge help with that. But yeah, I do feel like not a lot of us are prepared emotionally. It's hard to prepare for that. And like you said, Emily, I think that's why I'm so grateful for this community of people who are like, hey, yeah, I've been through the same thing. I mean, we're a tiny niche, but it's really, really cool to connect with people who are like, yes, I actually do know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So what about you, Jen?
It's fascinating.
Yeah. So I think I'm still unpacking the spinal fusion. And I think that my experience was different too, because I'm a selective thoracic fusion. So for a long time, I had that mobility in my lumbar. I didn't understand the lumbar curve, because I still have a 25-degree curve on my lumbar, and I think it's been unchanged. I've looked at the report from surgery time, and I recently had x-rays. So I didn't feel it as much physically when I was younger. But now I do start to feel it differently. And I think that in many ways, like, it has built a lot of resilience. I will also say that I was put in glasses, like really thick Coke bottle glasses, the day before my first birthday. So, I've never felt like I was this, like, I'm the imperfect, perfect human, and that's how we all are. And embracing that, I think, is really important. So when I went to the new junior high with my back brace that was super thick, my parents fortunately pulled together, the means to put me into contact lenses at that point, which I'm so thankful for.
You're very resilient from it, though. I'm sure that's helpful in some ways.
Yeah. And also, I think there was such a short time between diagnosis and surgery. I would imagine that, and it was very clearly explained to me that the reason why I needed surgery wasn't my fault, or because I didn't do those exercises. I did do them, and I did them religiously. Even I knew that. So I think that maybe having that shorter time period also can be easier for some people.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting. And then also, I have a brother who was in a very serious car accident when he was 19 or 20. And so, he is living independently and he does well, but he needs a lot of support. So I think that has also given me a lot of perspective, and also just working with so many different types of people. But yeah, so it's an interesting question. I do think I'm very, very sensitive, and I'm not sure how much of that. I think some of us with scoliosis and spinal fusions in general are more sensitive, but I do take care to try to stay really grounded and be aware of other people's energies, because that can affect me a lot.
Yeah, I was going to add to something that I've started doing in the last couple of years is a daily gratitude journal, which goes kind of hand in hand with what you said about being grounded. And I find a lot of times that, the thing that I write down 3 things every day. It's something a therapist recommended, and I just write down 3 like very specific things. And sometimes it's like, I planted vegetables in my garden today without pain or something like that. And looking back on those, I realized that a lot of those things are rooted in my body and what I have learned that it can do. And so, Emily, like, obviously your figure skating incident was super traumatizing because something is taken from you. There's a grief process. And I think it's important to recognize that it's not both. You can grieve what your body used to be, and you can also celebrate what it is now. And I've found that gratitude practice to be super helpful for kind of holding those 2 things that feel like they shouldn't exist together. Another paradox, you know?
The opposites.
Yeah, for sure.
And being able to hold them both and honor them both.
Exactly.
Definitely.
Yeah. Let's talk about how we discovered Pilates.
How did you discover it, Jen?
Yeah, you go first.
Yeah. So how did I discover Pilates? So, I was introduced to Pilates when I was young and I was dancing. I knew that it made me feel strong, that I felt stronger, and I didn't understand it. I didn't understand my body when I was for a long time when I was dancing. And I was trying to do everything. And I was young enough, and with a thoracic selective fusion, I managed to do a lot of things. For example, like rolling like a ball, I would roll like a ball. I tried rolling like a ball. The last time I rolled like a ball, I was like, I will never do this again. It
we're like,
literally made me feel sick. And that was a long time. But there was no education. Like, I was told, you can do anything, just don't do gymnastics. So I've learned so much, obviously. But when I really started to get serious about Pilates, and when I did my training, I was already teaching yoga. I was teaching yoga for people with spinal fusions. I really already was understanding the convexities and the concavities, and that the ribs can still, there was a lot I understood about scoliosis, and that resonated with me and my body and my experience. And something just told me that I needed more stability. So it just was some intuitive path, and I was like, this is the next thing. I was also a personal trainer by that point, and I wanted to do a full Pilates certification with the apparatus. I think too, the apparatus is just so fun. It feels like movement, like swimming or dancing. So that's kind of how I came to Pilates.
Oh, nice. I've never trained in apparatus, so I need to. Yeah, I'd love to have a go. But so I'm mat work trained, and I think I came to Pilates from a surgeon recommendation. Must have been pre-op to get strong, and it was something that after I had that incident that I mentioned with the figure skating, I knew that I needed my confidence built up. And what I love about Pilates is it's got that flavor of movement. I used to train in ballet, so it's similar-ish, and it gives you those tiny goals and tiny progressions, and that is so important for building body confidence back up and building confidence in yourself up. So I knew it would be really great for me. So I made sure to get back into that. And I mean, I remember my first sit up with the Pilates ball. I was just the best thing. Had a little ball behind my tailbone so I could do that kind of crunchy movement. And I was kind of hooked, I suppose. I knew I was going to be okay with my fusion from that moment. And so I trained after I had that moment of, or that period in my life where my back was really, really bad when I was doing my desk job. So that's how I came to come and train in it and eventually, teach it. So it's been a long time coming. But I think,
Nice.
What about you, Allie?
So when I am not teaching, I am a writer, and I worked in journalism for a long time. And I actually wrote a story on a local studio owner. And I was like, I kind of want to try this. I had heard about someone, I think probably a doctor or a surgeon or somebody had recommended, why don't you try reformer Pilates? Because it's very adaptable for your spine. And I was like, I don't know what that is. Like, what's a reformer? What are you talking about? And I just a couple of years later did this story and discovered a studio super close to my house. I tried a few classes, and like you said, Emily, I was hooked. I was like, hello, this is great. So gosh, less than 6 months later, I started my training, and I did similar to Jen. I did the full comprehensive mat apparatus and all that stuff. And obviously haven't looked back,
Oh, I love that.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Let's talk a little bit about what our experience was like going through teacher training.
Ooh.
That's an interesting one. And I think that we're going to have really different experiences, so I'm excited.
Me too.
I think non-adapted is the word that comes to mind. I think when I had to do my final exams, I had to teach a roll down, which was ridiculous. I know. Did either of you have to do that?
No, thankfully, but I wouldn't have been able to. It would have been like a hinge down.
I said this to the course leaders. I said, I really, really cannot do a roll down. And they're going, oh, just try. And I'm thinking, this is it. So they said, oh, this is a great chance to learn your visualization cues and a great chance to practice it. So I think I had to talk about a leaf curling slowly down or something rubbish. And but I felt the whole time that I was this kind of round peg trying to jam into a square hole, and it just wasn't working. And I think it took me a long time after I qualified for it to click in my head and think, actually, why am I excluding myself from my own classes when there's this whole group of people around me who are exactly the same, who I know will benefit from Pilates? And that's why I've kind of come to develop my own method and my own way of doing things. Is it quite similar with the apparatus? Can you adapt it?
I think so. You either adapt it or you modify, or you just, there's some stuff you just, I don't do. Yeah. But again, like creativity. Go ahead, Allie. I'm curious.
I feel like with the equipment, you can kind of, with mat work, you have your body and the ground and props and stuff. And yes, of course you can modify, but it does take a certain brain channel, which you obviously have, Emily. And I sometimes I'm like, I run out of ideas. And with the equipment, I've felt like there are endless ways to adjust a piece of machinery to fit your body rather than changing your body to fit into an exercise. You know what I mean? And it was definitely square peg round hole is such a great way to describe it, because I trained with people who were also in dance backgrounds, and I was the only fused person amongst 12 or 13 people who went through training with me. And it was like, I have to learn how to make this work for my body or not. It really gave me a lot of, there were a lot of mental blocks when I would get frustrated that I couldn't do something. But I feel like there was a tipping point where I reached let's figure out how to get that same benefit. And at that point, it kind of turned the corner and was more empowering than mental block. And I do think having equipment and props and creativity, yeah, I know, right, helps a lot with that. I think I would have been super discouraged if I had done only mat, just because, like, again, my brain just doesn't work like that. So yay you that you're studies, because you have totally found your niche and it's working. But anyway, full circle, how was training? It was an emotional roller coaster. It was a lot. There were moments where I was like, my body will never do this, and I'm mad and I'm sad and all the feelings. And that's where that counseling bit came in. And then there were those moments where I was like, wait a minute, I can do this, or I can adapt it this way, and it feels great. So in a word, it was a roller coaster.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah.
And frustration is a great word.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think roller coaster for me would be a good word to describe my experience as well. I came in knowing a fair amount about scoliosis and spinal fusions because I'd been studying yoga through that lens, and I had been exposed to Schroth therapy. I will say my first weekend was extraordinarily traumatic in that the physical therapist, who was a mentor, was asking me to do rotation. And, in her mind, she's thinking, oh, but you only have a thoracic fusion. But the whole understanding of a lumbar curve and kind of where I am in my life, as far as what happens with lumbar curves, she did not understand scoliosis. Then, yes. So I spent a month after my first weekend, like, not being able to sit comfortably because she had actually put her hands on me and tried to have me do roll down. Yeah, it was horrible. It was really terrible. I'm not going to lie about it. And I was very vocal about it. Because I had said, as she was asking me to do these things, this is a precaution. I said contraindication. It's probably more, if you're going to be technical, a precaution. But I said, why would I do that? That's a contraindication for someone who has a spinal fusion and scoliosis. So my first weekend was a hot mess. It did get a lot better. I learned so much from that program. I think that my colleagues that were taking it with me didn't quite understand. And again, like, I'm really glad that I had already had my prior experience, and I had, where I learned to work with scoliosis and spinal fusions was in New York, in person, in a studio. So I had those mentors that I could call on the phone or I could text. And I was really thankful for that. And then the other piece that I really struggled with, and I think that this may have been more of just an organizational misstep and lack of organization, is that I had to do an advanced circuit, which is you do about, like, they decide which 15 advanced exercises you're going to do, and it's on all the different apparatus. And so I was prepared to either modify or to do a different exercise. And, they have like a grading sheet, and they're like going to write down. And it was introduced as, like, we understand that some of you have some significant challenges, and don't worry, we understand, we know that. I didn't anticipate that I was going to have to say 6 times, I know what that exercise is, but I have a spinal fusion, so I'm replacing it with this. So having to verbalize that 6 times within an hour was very difficult for me. And it made me angry that they didn't kind of take care of that emotional piece. But again, I really learned a lot. And in general, it was a good experience, but there were challenges as well.
Tough, isn't it?
Yeah. Again, it's like, it's that paradox, and there's a lot of paradoxes in life. So, holding them both as truth is a process of learning.
For sure.
And one thing this is making me think that we can all take from it as well is, obviously, we've come from that place of frustration with the course, but actually how much more do we know about our bodies from it, and how much are we now able to help people that are in that same position? It's amazing. So we've almost taken the blow for a lot of people with that frustration, and we're able to help so many more people because of it. So we can try and make a positive out of it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that, that's why I was so vocal about it, because I wanted to advocate for anyone else that came after me. Because I went in with a huge amount of knowledge about, and also just respecting what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do. Yeah. So, yeah, I totally agree. Like Emily, like taking that and turning it into positive and sharing those experiences and kind of leading the way for other people. So, yeah, let's get down to some meat. So how do you both approach teaching other people with spinal fusions?
Go on, Allie. I feel like we're going to have such different approaches because of the equipment. I'm fascinated about the format.
I'm curious to hear your answer too. The biggest thing I think is honestly recognizing that you're working with a whole person and not just a body. Obviously, we've been talking about emotions and stuff here. And I think one of the first things that I do when people come in is so I teach primarily private sessions with a sprinkling of groups in there. And I'll just speak about my private sessions because that's where I get to really do my thing. But I come in and somebody is like, I've never done Pilates, I am in pain, or I have this goal or whatever. And I like to talk people through okay, here's where you are today. Where do you want to be? I had someone come to me this week who was like, I just want to run again. Or I want to be able to go to my yoga class and comfortably do downward dog or whatever it is. And I usually start with okay, let's figure out how to A, get you out of pain if that's one of your goals, and B, start taking steps towards that goal, because I feel like all of us just need a quick win sometimes. It gets really discouraging if you start doing something and you're not really seeing the results that you want or whatever. So I guess in short, I try to keep it as client-centric as possible and listen to what they need and what they want, because my goals for their movement might not be the same as their goals. And once we kind of get moving, I feel like we usually discover other things that we can address, oh, my shoulder hurts and this hasn't happened before. Okay, let's work on that. And then the biggest thing is just, I want to encourage people to take movement and Pilates into their life. So I'm not above, training to lift your laundry basket, and I feel like that functional piece is something that really sets Pilates apart. And of course, other modalities do that too. But I love how Pilates lends itself to real life, to, hey, can you replicate this motion when you're, picking up your toddler or moving your laundry or whatever it may be.
Brushing your teeth. That's one
exactly of my leaning over the sink, whatever. So functional stuff. And then one more thing that I feel like is super important is I try to encourage people to be curious about their body, because like I mentioned earlier, I feel like we lose touch with our body because it moves differently now. And so I like to ask questions of well, what would it feel like to do this? And have you tried this? And encouraging people to get to know their own body again through movement. So that's it in a nutshell. And yes, Emily, I'm so curious to hear. I bet there's a lot similar, because to be honest, I feel like you can do that with or without equipment. Obviously, you can do that anything.
Yeah. And I love what you're picking up on about that kind of separation of your body. And I think what people often do is expect your body as a different problem, so they hope someone will come and fix that separate problem. And no, you're a whole person. And I love your focus on the goals that actually matter, like being able to spend more time with your kids. Like, how important is that? And that's one of the things that I think traditional Pilates does, is look at aesthetics. And I think a lot of classes, definitely in the UK, are all about toned Pilates arms and flat washboard abs. And you think, actually, that's not what we're doing here. We're functionally improving your day-to-day quality of life. And so that's a big mindset shift that I try and work with people on. But I think actually the movements that I do are very different to traditional mat Pilates. So I'm very much focused on core strengthening, which traditionally might be lots of crunching, twisting. So there's lots of new movements, for example, in your plank positions or working in a pelvic tilt with tabletop legs. Like there's loads of stuff that you can do to get that abs working, get the rest of your core working as a whole without doing any bending. And the other thing I really focus on is pain management. And this is, again, a very holistic thing. I think some people just need to get moving. You know, they're working desk jobs, doing a Pilates class a week, fab's going to really help. Some people need that time to tune in with themselves, the time to breathe, and also to find stretches that are doable without like contorting into a weird position, because we obviously can't. I often get people and they're like, oh, I'm so frustrated, I just want to do a roly-poly. And then do you have that in the US, a roly-poly? Like a forward roll?
We have the insects.
I just caught myself. Like a forward roll.
Okay.
Oh, like a somersault, like on the ground. Got it.
Ooh.
We call it a roly-poly.
I love that, because it is.
Yeah,
Can I borrow that? Can I call it that now? That's so much
Allie
better than a somersault.
Allie and I always chat on Instagram about funny words across the US and the UK. But somebody will come to me and say, you know, I want to stretch my spine in this way and I can't anymore, and I know it will solve my pain. So that's quite a nice challenge to think, oh, how can we give you that satisfaction of getting that twist? So yeah, I think the way it's adapted is that with a fusion, you need core strength for that stability that you mentioned, Jen, and you need that holistic pain management. So that's what I try and deliver through classes. So crunch free. No way.
Yep. And there is research that crunches aren't that effective as well. Like they've done. I'll find the research. I'll try to put it in the show notes.
And
right, we're starting a campaign to just move on from crunches. Just no.
Yeah, let's just leave them at the door. The other thing is touching toes. A lot of people say, oh, I wish I could touch my toes. I say, look, even if you weren't fused, I would say no for your lower back's sake with the touching the toes. So let's move on from that as well. People are obsessed with it.
Yeah. I teach touching toes as a hip hinge.
Ooh.
So that it's only coming from the pelvis moving over the tops of the thigh bones.
I like that.
And again, like it doesn't have to be touching the toes. It can be the same shape, putting your legs up on the wall and having your back supported by the floor, because then you know the back isn't rounding, which would be rounding into the back body. So again, like, yeah.
Good tip. Thank you.
Yeah. So I typically teach people with spinal fusions. I have some concepts that I use. So I'll talk about neutral spine. And, you know, that can be a really challenging concept because depending upon our individual fusion, our neutral spine is going to be different. Mm-hmm. You know, I have an old Harrington fusion, so my thoracic is flattened. And some people have had, especially when people have had surgery later in life, they may have lost their lumbar natural curve towards the front body, the lordosis. That may have started to go into the opposite direction, into the back body. And sometimes they'll restore that in surgery. So kind of I talk about neutral spine and how all of ours are different. I talk a lot about axial elongation, lengthening the spine, widening through the rib cage because those areas of collapse, those concavities are still there. And I do teach like what happens with scoliosis and the rotation, because my experience is that the spinal fusion fixed the spine, but it didn't change the neuromuscular patterning of the soft tissue or the ribs. Mm-hmm. So I spend a lot of time, not a lot of time, but I spend some time talking about concavities and convexities. And I also have other concepts that I think can be used until people grasp that. And Allie, I think it's so important to be curious, like you were saying. Because that, I believe, is what brought us all here to this place, is being curious about what we can do and what the scoliosis and the spinal fusion, how that has affected us. So I love that curiosity. Yeah.
One thing as well that's really interesting across all of us, no one's mentioned aesthetics. And I think the fitness industry is so hellbound on looking a certain way. And I am really pleased that that hasn't come up at all, because I think that, again, is a way that we're all adapting to people with scoliosis and a fusion. We're not promising that specific body type. We're looking at actually how they're feeling and the other benefits of exercise. And I think that's one thing I try and do with clients, especially one-to-one clients, is to set those almost mental health goals alongside the physical, and looking at actually, how do I feel today? Do I feel confident in myself? Do I feel that I'm progressing, as well as this niggle gone away a little bit in the physical sense? So yeah, that's really nice.
Yeah. Well, and I loved what you said earlier, Emily, about quality of life, because that's, I mean, that my biggest goal is to help people find a better quality of life through movement. And I feel like you're right. I mean, we do focus on the aesthetics a lot, but the more I've found that I focus on my own quality of life or my clients' quality of life, the less I think about what I look like. It's like, not that I don't care, but it's just not nearly as important, because you have these other wins that you've had. And I'm with you. I love that we all focus on quality over looks, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And function, like that quality of life goes into that functional piece of, that hip hinge comes in really handy when you're going to wash your face or load the dishwasher. And, that squat comes in handy when you're going to pick up that heavy basket of laundry.
Yeah. Yep.
So what other modalities do you have other modalities or like people that influence how you teach?
You go first, Jen, because I know you have a yoga background. How does that work?
So I have a yoga background, and again, like my yoga background, I've been a yoga teacher for probably, I'm looking at the date right now, I think maybe 15 or so years. The last 10 years, really more specifically, scoliosis and spinal fusions. And so that is where I really learned the axial elongation and the width, and the breath can be so helpful, especially in like opening those concavities and opening those intercostal muscles where the ribs are close together. So definitely yoga influences my Pilates classes. And in fact, I think that you can call, say, a scooter a Warrior 3, or you can call a Warrior 3 a single leg RDL. Like there are a lot of similarities between the different modalities. And so I think it's just important that people choose the movement that they love, and I don't care what it's called. And then also, I'm a little nerdy. I studied accounting. I became a CPA. I like to like research and study stuff. So I do try to teach some anatomy. Sometimes like I'll do a little like anatomy, like this is what we're talking about today at the beginning. And it's cool on Zoom. Yeah, because you can like show things up on the screen and share your screen. And then I'll teach a whole class around that. But then I also get that not everyone is like that. And that doesn't resonate with everyone. So I do try to really use metaphors and nature and all sorts of things, because for some people that's really wonderful. Like Eric Franklin's work, I really appreciate because of that imagery.
Love him.
Yeah. So I think, and then the functional piece, that is definitely like infused. Today in my classes, we were working on split lunges, and really I think of split lunges as a great way of being able to get off the floor.
Yeah.
So even if you have a chair in front of you, that it's super functional. So yeah. So how about you both? How about you, Emily? What type of influences do you have in your work?
I think the physiotherapy approach of self-management is a huge thing that I try and learn from and share with people, trying to avoid language of helping people and trying to kind of empower people that they've got the strength themselves. That's a huge thing for me. And I think also, like you've said about that functional fitness, so trying to encourage movement, whatever it is. It could be brushing your teeth, it could be going for a walk in nature, just trying to bring in those small things and showing that everything's productive. You know, you don't have to do a sweaty half an hour HIIT class to have benefit to your body. So I think just bringing in gentler movement, as I say, that physiotherapy edge where it's smaller, subtle movements that have a bigger impact, and self-management.
Yeah, I like that you're talking about smaller movements, because that is sometimes smaller movements. And also when you're really working your deep intrinsic muscles, there might not be as big of a feeling, and that's okay, because we really do need to strengthen those intrinsic muscles and those smaller movements. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. I like what you said about, oh, my mind just went blank. You said something really good. It'll come back to me. Empowering people. Duh. So I see the anatomy piece as another way to empower people, because when you know how your body works, you know how to help it yourself. And I'm with you, Emily, on like giving people tools to help themselves. And for that reason, I incorporate a lot of stuff like myofascial release type things, using like a massage ball, because that's something that you can do anywhere. You know, you can travel with that. You can take it on your trip. You can stick it in your night table and use it every night before bed. So definitely massage. Like, I see a massage therapist and he has taught me so much, and I've been able to use, you know, props and balls and things like that to pass that knowledge on to my clients and the people that I work with. And then you guys both talked about the breath, and I feel like mindfulness has been a big thing for me, because in my experience, tuning into my breath allows me to listen to my body better and just figure out, okay, where am I holding tension? And a lot of times that can tell you a lot more than looking at alignment or even pain. You just tune in. And I feel like yoga really lends itself to that. So I feel like I have a lot of yoga melded into what I do, even though I'm not a yoga teacher. That and just the general mindfulness, for sure. I think it's a huge piece to, again, empower people.
Yeah. And I love that you do that for yourself as well, like with your journaling and everything. Like, you're very clearly practicing what you preach. And I think that's the best way of encouraging others, like leading by example. I love that.
Yeah.
Thanks. I mean, it's a journey. Y'all know that. And I feel like maybe you guys will agree, but I feel like the things that have been the most helpful for me to teach to other people are the things that I've learned for my own body. You know, like, I wouldn't have even done Pilates if I didn't have this special body. And so I've continually pursued other more niche-y things, and those end up helping clients as well, not just me.
Yeah, I think, you know, that's what we can do, is teach from our experience. And then also, you know, it's an open dialogue, because I know my experience is different than everyone else's experience. And so I do, in my classes, I encourage people to give feedback to how they're feeling, because I've read a lot of surgery reports. I mean, I love to read surgery reports, and they're all very different. So I know that we're all different. Oh yeah, no, I'm talking, you got a bona fide nerd over here.
You're like, you have medical reports? Can I have them?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I keep them all confidential, but it just helps me to kind of understand. Sometimes there's a little piece in there that a client will say like, oh, I have this psoas, you know, it's just interesting. But for sure, I think teaching from our experience and just offering it as like, this is what helps me in this situation. It may or may not help you, and that's okay. But putting it out there is so important to share with other people.
Yeah.
Let's see. Do you guys have a favorite Pilates prop, apparatus, or exercise?
Yes,
I was so
and
ready for this.
you stole mine.
Allie, take it.
I'm ready. Well, Emily started to say something. You want to go first?
I was going to say that you stole mine, Allie, because mine are the spiky massage balls. They're the best thing ever. And
They're
what
awesome.
I love is when you give one to a client for the first time and they also have this revelation of how amazing this spiky ball is. And it's the best thing. And then the week later, they'll come back and say, everyone in the family's tried it. We're all transformed. We love it. No one's had any aches or pains. Oh, it's fab. I love them.
I love that.
That's great.
You're right, though. People, you hand them a little like $2 ball and they're like, oh, my life has changed. And you're like, I know. Yeah, it's great. Simple things. Well, I pulled it off of my prop shelf. I love stability balls. I was like ready for this question. I love to, you mentioned earlier, Emily, that you like to put it under your tailbone. Yeah. And that was also a cool revelation for me, was when I had this ball under my tailbone and all of a sudden I was like, I have abs and they can work. So that's fun, but I also love using it as like a way to, so sometimes I'll put it under my head and it gives you a little more mobility for your neck, or there are endless ways to use that thing. And so I love it. And I also like, I know we were talking a little bit about apparatus stuff. I also love the Cadillac too, because there are a bajillion options, and sometimes you just need to feel super strong, and I feel like the Cadillac offers you just about everything from I need to work on this one tiny muscle in my shoulder girdle today to I want to hang upside down. Like
I want to do a pull-up.
Yeah, like it's so versatile. I think I lean a lot towards things that are versatile because again, it forces me to be creative. So yeah.
I want to have a go. I might have to fly out to you so I can try your Cadillac.
Do it.
Please do.
We'll be here.
Yeah. I think that I love the Reformer. I love the Cadillac too. I love the Cadillac. I love the chair. But I think I like the Reformer because the carriage moving while you're doing something with your legs or your arms. I just love being on that unstable surface, and I love that movement. I think that is so fun for me. I really enjoy the Reformer. I mean, I love all the apparatus. And I'm trying to think, I have a few things, like my favorite, as far as like, I love to do when I'm on the Reformer, a prone, so face down pull up off of not the foot bar, but the other end.
Oh, like where the pulleys are.
Yeah, the springs are giving you a little traction. It opens up my back ribs and my thoracic concavity. And then I always am a big fan of just like side-lying hip abduction. Because I find when my curve is down, I can work the concave muscles eccentrically against gravity. And that is one of the best things for my lumbar, that's for sure. So yeah.
Nice.
But, I mean, there's just unlimited options with Pilates, which is so fun, like from the little balls to the spiky balls to the big Cadillac.
So much.
Yeah, so much. So do you both have tips, or what if someone asks you like, oh, how should I start Pilates and I have a spinal fusion? Like, are there things that you tell people, or how do you approach that?
Emily, you go first.
My biggest thing is building trust with yourself. I think people always talk about body confidence as like looking in the mirror and thinking, oh yeah, looking great today. But I look at it as trusting your body to perform and to be able to exercise. That's a huge barrier for starting Pilates, isn't it? And I think trusting yourself and knowing that you're doing this movement for you is so powerful. And that kind of learning about nurturing your body, you're not working against it. Your body's supported you through this incredible operation. your body's never made a mistake. It's really there looking after for you. And so we need to give it that in return. So it really doesn't matter if you're on level 1, you're literally lifting your leg an inch off the floor. You're doing such fantastic work for your body, and you can progress from there. And so in terms of tips, just take it at your own pace, finding small progressions that when you hit, have a massive celebration about, make a huge fuss, and build that body confidence.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I totally agree with that. And I feel like my biggest thing is awareness. I just encourage people to use movement, whether it's Pilates or yoga or running, whatever, to use movement to get to know their body better, because I think the better you know your body, the better you can care for it. And we only get one of these, you have to take care of your one body.
Yeah.
For that long-term quality of life, right? And so I usually encourage people, hey, approach this as a learning experience and not as a performance or a checkbox thing. I'm a checklist person, and movement has really forced me to be like, hey, let's not, push ourselves just for the sake of checking off the box of hanging upside down or whatever challenging thing it is. Let's approach it with, what can I learn? How can I feel better? And how can I really move towards accepting my body, because my body moves differently. And we've talked about the grief, and we've talked about the shift emotionally. And it's like, how can I use movement as a tool to learn to love this body that I've got? Because we can spend our life hating it, or we can learn how to accept it. And I try to encourage people, just, let go of your perfectionism, let go of your expectations of yourself, and just show up for yourself and take care of yourself and try. And eventually you're going to feel better one way or the other if you stick with the movement and you stick with it. And yeah, so I think that's my biggest thing, is just helping people, encouraging people to get out of their head.
Yes.
And try it and recognize that it doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
And I loved what you said earlier, you said you described yourself as being in a special body. I love that so much. I'm definitely going to be using that. Yes. I love the idea of appreciating that.
Yeah, I mean, our special bodies teach us how to be compassionate, because we know what it's like to live with quirks, and we can see other people's perspectives. So yeah, we're special. Embrace it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think I have some gratitude because I have this challenge, and it forces me to take care of myself. There's really just not another option.
Yep.
And, it's also this gift that we get to share with other people. I think for me, tips for people with spinal fusions, I might say stay curious. So, and I think that that goes back to what you were saying, Allie, and you were saying, Emily, being curious and trying to understand your own body, and then also what has happened to your body and what has happened to us with the fusion and with the scoliosis. And because if you stay curious, also as things change when we age, then you'll learn new things, because I do think things change as we age with a spinal fusion. So yeah, I think maybe staying curious and not only just curious about them. Well, I curious about it all if it interests you, the anatomy and the physical experience and all of it. So I just want to see if we have any questions. First, does our audience have any questions? And second, you can ask a question of any of us. Emily or Allie, do you have any questions for any of us? I'm trying to think. I feel like we kind of jumped in.
I think, so I'm relatively young. I only had my fusion 8 years ago. what kind of challenges have you faced? And you keep mentioning, Jen, like as you get older, it's changed. What ways have you noticed it changing?
Yeah. So I think what I've noticed changing is the rib cage. The rib cage still kind of wanting to rotate even though the spine is fixed. And so with that rotation, working with the concavities and the convexities and really opening up those concavities has been helpful for me. And then I think some of the changes, you know, even if you don't have a spinal fusion, your body's going to change as you age. So I've also, you know, because my lumbar was not fused, I had a lot of movement there, and I was a hypermobile kid and teenager into my, well, many of us are. So I've just also noticed that my lumbar has become stiffer, and I am embracing that because with the research shows that a lumbar curve has, it's a predictor for pain, just even having a lumbar curve in someone who's not fused. There's a lot of things that go on with the lumbar. So I'm all about stabilizing my lumbar. Yeah, and I think I've also noticed more tension up in my head, neck, and shoulders. And some of this, you know, it's hard to know because when I was younger, I wasn't as aware. Like, that's what's so great is that you both fully embrace and know people who have scoliosis spinal fusions. So I think too, like some of it is, well, some of these things might have been going on, but maybe they weren't. So yeah. Does that help answer? I'm trying to think if there's anything else.
Yeah, I think so. And I think we're probably doing the best things we can to mitigate that as we get older. So
absolutely. Yeah. And then, you know, for me, when what I was doing wasn't working, then I just stayed curious and I was like, oh, now I need to go down that path, you know, and that was part of my Pilates journey. It's like, oh, this is the journey I need to take now. So that's part of that, like staying curious and always, you know, kind of wanting to learn.
Yeah.
So
I have a question for both of you, if we have time. Do we have time?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So I would love to know, I feel like this has come up for me both in myself and in clients. I feel like a lot of the time we let our fusion define us and how we live life. And I would love to hear maybe a little bit about both of your experiences with realizing like I'm a human with a fusion, not living from that place of broken, damaged mindset, if that makes sense. And what your experience has been with clients. How have you been able to move past that like all-encompassing identity, and how do you feel like you can help other people do that?
I mean, I think personally, I never identified as somebody with a fusion in a weird way because I suppressed it. And now my whole life is that I've got a fusion and I'm trying to help people with a fusion as well. And that personally has been more helpful for me because it connects me with the community. And I think in terms of helping other people in that same regard, by giving people a class, for example, my classes, I've got a class where people are all fused or people have all got scoliosis and they're not fused. They come to the class and it's like an outlet for that part of them. So in that hour, you are somebody with a fusion. So is everybody else in the room. That's the only thing that matters. We're doing Pilates to help you fusion. And because you have that dedicated space and time to think about it, after the hour, you're somebody completely different. You can go out, do your job, see your kids, cook your dinner, but you have that time to process it. So I think that's really important.
That's awesome.
I totally agree. And I think, you know, that's something I'm really grateful. One of my mentors is Deborah Wolk in New York, who is the founder of a back care and scoliosis yoga center called Samam Kaya. And she is not fused. And she has always been adamant. She was the first person to teach a yoga class for people with spinal fusions. She doesn't have a fusion, but she wanted that dedicated space. And it's really nice because, again, like, you know, my experience might not be Allie's experience, but if we have this space where people feel comfortable to say something, then, you know, that's why I want people to speak up, because then someone else in the class might be like, oh, actually, I experienced that too. And then it helps me to think like, okay, like I'll spend that week thinking about this thing. And yeah, so
Amazing.
yeah, it's great. Let's
I love that.
let's look at this question from Lady Dean. So she's asking
Hello.
if any of us are fused to our sacrum. She's fused T4 to her sacrum.
I'm down to L5, which is the lowest one in the lumbar spine, but I imagine that much lower than that is a huge difference in mobility. Are either of you?
I am not. I've worked with several people who are fused into their sacrum, and you're right. I've seen a huge difference in mobility, and the biggest thing that those clients benefited from was keeping everything else mobile, because obviously, your low spine can no longer really move in relation to your pelvis if you have fusion all the way into your pelvis or your sacrum. And so in my experience, it's been really helpful to keep your hips moving and loose and that kind of stuff. But I myself am just fused to L3. So I'm close to Emily, but yours is a bit lower.
Yeah, and I'm fused from T3 to T10, so I'm a selective thoracic fusion. I have several clients who are fused into their sacrum and into their pelvis. I think in part because of my teaching in New York, and not always, but oftentimes when people are fused later in life, it goes down into the sacrum and into the pelvis. Mm-hmm. And I am always trying to stay neutral through the lumbar and through the lumbosacral joint. So I think the experience is different, especially if we start talking about people with fusions and pelvic shift. If you have a pelvic shift and you're fused down to your sacrum, we're not going to adjust that. But I do know, Lady Dean, that there are other people that are here with us as audience members that are fused into their sacrum, because I can see that there are quite a few of my students that are here who have fusions down into their sacrum. There is, I think, even like in all the Pilates apparatus and also like traditional mat, well, not traditional, but fusion friendly mat work, there's still a great deal that you can do, but let us know if you have specific questions. And then here we have another question from Abigail. So how to begin Pilates after a spinal fusion?
Oh, slowly, very slowly. Definitely wait till you've got sign off from your surgeon. I mean, I wouldn't have somebody in a group class till a year post-op. Just build it, like we've been saying this whole time, just doing it very incrementally, finding teeny tiny moves, just thinking about switching on the muscles, and then build up slowly.
Yeah, I think starting slowly is really important. I think, this question could be interpreted two ways. Like, one is how soon after surgery to start, and that is definitely like doctor's clearance. And then the second question is just how to kind of begin. And surgery to start, I think, sorry, there's a little feedback there. This question, like for me personally, and I'm not trying to market myself, but the reason why I teach an intro class is so that people can go slow and so that people can answer all their questions or ask all their questions, and that there can be a conversation. So it's half conversation, half quote unquote lecture, half movement. Yeah. But I think going slow is helpful. And I do think finding someone who understands spinal fusions is helpful, because you can say I have a spinal fusion and people do not know what that means.
Yeah. And I would add too that might not be the first person you see. And even if you do find a practitioner that you like in the beginning, you can always try other people. You can try different formats. Like Emily mentioned, probably don't do a group class for a while, which, yeah, totally smart. But try different formats. Try an intro class. Try a private session. Try a, beginner group class where you're able to discuss with the instructor beforehand, and be willing to find the format, find the instructor, find the environment that works for you, because again, we have a special body and we can't necessarily just walk into any yoga studio and it be perfect for us, or Pilates studio, or whatever you're trying. So kind of goes back to that curiosity piece,
Yes.
you know, find what works for you and listen to your body. If you go to a Pilates class and you're like, it just didn't feel great, listen to that, you know, and try something else and keep searching. All three of us, I know, would be happy to serve as a resource if you're like, hey, I don't know what I need. I don't know if I need you, but I need help. Like, reach out to someone who does understand what it's like to have a fusion, and we can help you find the path for your body and your needs.
Yeah. So Lady Dean, who was asking if any of us are fused to our sacrum, was saying that this is also new to her because she was initially fused to L4 and her revision surgery. So oftentimes people, in my experience, people who are fused later in life or have revision surgery end up having a fusion into the sacrum and into the pelvis. So that was her situation. She was just looking at ways to feel better, and she's been doing aquatic physical therapy, which I think the water is fantastic. And you know, again, like I would say, kind of staying curious about, you know, maybe Pilates will work, or maybe strength training or yoga, and kind of, you know, taking that approach. So awesome. Okay. I think that's a wrap. Anything else that why don't we all go around and say how you can find us? Emily, how can people find you?
Our website is www.buildbreathe.co.uk, and we're on Instagram as well at buildbreathe, just 2 words.
Awesome.
Nice.
And Allie?
Yeah, my website is Pilates with Allie, ALLIE.com. And then on Instagram, you can find me Pilates.with.Allie. Easy as that.
Great. And you can find me, I'm Jen, at scoliosis and backcare.com. And that's also my Instagram handle. And I think I have a Facebook page. Scoliosis and back care. And I'll put some of that information in the show notes when this is recorded. So
Jen, thank you for hosting. This was great.
Thank you.
Amazing that we can come together like from across the Atlantic. It's fantastic.
So amazing. And thank you for being my first people to experience a live stream. I think that we did it.
Yeah, and thanks to everybody tuning in. Like, this is just cool. I'm just grateful we did this. Glad to have this community for sure.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, have a great day or evening in the UK. So until next time, we'll do this again.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.